Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Prettyman. Thanks for coming to A Dog Named Ego. I was thinking, I wonder if my glasses are smudged. Because when they're smudged, I think I'm either a geek or creepy. Okay, A Dog Named Ego comes from a quote from Nietzsche. I can talk about him because I went to Harvard. I went to Harvard Divinity School. If I had one more gray suit, I think my life might feel better. Not sure. So, the quote from Nietzsche is, "Whatever I climb, I am followed by a dog named ego." So, to start with, the question is, what is ego? And if you start doing research, beyond the basic Google search, that is, you'll find there's a myriad of definitions. I'm a little concerned that you think I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm a little worried about looking like a fake, even though I'm a genius. I mean, I do paintings, I'm an artist. I have to remember, I went to Harvard, so I should be able to do this in front of people. I think I know what I'm talking. I did the reading. All right, I did do the reading. I can do this. So we can go back 2,500 years to Buddha. Even Buddha had some inkling about an ego. In fact, he called it an ego, I believe. Is that right?
Hi.
Is that right?
Hi. How's it going?
It's going okay. I feel a little insecure. I don't think they believe that I know what I'm talking about. I feel a little unorganized, like I'm not prepared.
You're doing perfectly. You're playing a role.
What do you mean I'm playing a role? This is me. I'm just doing this lecture about, okay. So even older, even before Buddha, the oldest religion, animism, even in animism they talked about an ego, some sort of definition of another self, a self outside of the self. Why is that guy waving? Is there something wrong with me? Is my zipper, is it something?
He's trying to help us.
I think I'm going to kill myself. I'm thinking about
It has to be switched
possibly
on.
killing myself at this. But no one cares. No one cares. No one cares about this. I think this is, I don't know. I look like an idiot. I mean, this is fake. Why should anyone care about the ego? We have Trump.
Hey,
we have enough.
Hey. Read that.
Are you confused? If you are, good. I'm having trouble with your writing.
It means you're about to learn something.
That's how you know you are about to learn something.
Yes. So listen,
Yeah.
the deal is
Yeah.
you're performing a part.
Okay.
It's like wearing a mask,
Yeah.
but you have forgotten that you put a mask on,
Okay.
okay?
Okay.
So you're doing the best that you can do
Okay.
under your given circumstances. Okay?
Yeah.
Keep going.
Keep going. The word ego comes simply from the Latin word I. Ego means I. And so there's this notion that there's an ego that is not exactly I. There's I, and then there's this other ego I. So there seems to be like two of us.
So if you can say, I have an ego, watch.
Are there two of us? Is this two? Are we two? Is this two? Are we two?
We are now. If you can say, I have an ego.
I have an ego.
Okay, but ego means I.
Ego means I.
So if you do away with the Latin and just go with, I have an I.
I have an I.
You could also say, ego has an ego.
Right.
You could also say, ego has an I.
Right.
So once you start taking apart the words, this sort of simple formulation of ego kind of falls apart.
I see.
So I think what we kind of want to do is look more at some other wisdom traditions,
Okay.
which is what we're going to do tonight.
Okay.
Once we start taking apart ego and I and identity, we kind of go down a rabbit hole. It can get very confusing. So for that reason, tonight we're going to address what ego is using metaphor. So the metaphor of performance, the metaphor of visual arts, and the metaphor of a short story. But before we start doing that, let's look at what ego means in some different languages, some different traditions. In the Hindu tradition, well, first of all, we tend to think that Sigmund Freud invented ego. Sigmund Freud did not invent ego. All right, that's sort of a white man Western privilege. Ego really first appears in something called the Rig Veda, which is about 4,000 years old. In the Rig Veda, in Sanskrit, its ego is called ahamkara. So two root words put together, aham, which means mind, kara, which means that which is created. So this begins to give us a sort of clue into what ego might be. It is a mind that not that is born, but is created. In the Buddhist tradition, ego is called anatta, the illusory self. So what is the illusion? Why is it there? Is it harmful? A lot of times we tend to automatically go to this statement that ego is bad. Ego has to be destroyed. Ego must be snuffed out, right? I don't think that's a healthy way to look at it. First of all, we're all born with one. It seems to be built into the fabric of our world. We'll use the work of Carl Jung, Edinger, and a guy named James Hollis to sort of look at some ideas of how ego develops in the human mind. And that can give us some insight into what it might really be and how we could imagine a healthy ego versus an unhealthy ego. Because the goal of wisdom traditions is not to snuff it out. It's not to kill it. It's not to slay the dragon. It's to create a healthy relationship between ego, the created self, and the real self. Will you help me? So within depth psychology that was pioneered by Carl Jung and continued by Edinger and Hollis, there is something called the self as opposed to the ego. The self is a larger set. The ego is a smaller set. So it's often represented by this symbol. This would be ego. This would be self. I tend to like to represent self with a circular rainbow like this, and I've made this tool that I made myself.
You did it.
I did it. I did it. I like this because it's more of a continuum. Thanks. So let's start with this painting because we're going to talk about development, the development of consciousness in an individual human being. So I'm a little trepidatious about showing this painting. The first 2 times I exhibited it, people looked at it and they said, "Oh, I get it, abortion." Just like, and it confused me because it was not only that, but the people that were pro-life said, "Oh, so you're saying, you know, you're killing babies up there, right there on the canvas." And the people that are pro-choice are saying, "Oh, so you're saying we shouldn't have abortions, right?" And I'm just like, no. This is about the undifferentiated state. The point that I was trying to make is like I was kind of searching for a common point in every single human life that we all have in common, right? No matter where we come from, no matter what age we lived in, no matter the circumstances of our life, what could that possibly be? And this is what I came up with. Every single one of us were in this position at some point, right? We're in a warm, soft, safe place where all of our needs are met. We have no problems whatsoever. So in that case, we are like this. We are pure self. We are immersed in the larger sense of the world. You can think of this as being kind of like the state of being itself. So pre-conscious state. But then something happens. It's like one day you're thrust out and it's cold and it's loud and it's bright and it fucking hurts. And that's your birthday. So at this point, at this undifferentiated state, you would draw that like this. So the ego is immersed in a much larger state, the state of being itself. This is the self. The ego knows nothing more than the self. But as we age, as we get older, we start to get a sense of ourselves as a separate being. So when a baby's born, it's got no idea, no sense of it that anything is other than it. Everything is the baby. Everything is about it. Like the world literally revolves around it. But as we develop, as our psyches develop, this point of individual, this sense of yourself as an individual begins to do this. It floats out. So we begin to get an idea of like, oh shit, like I'm hungry, I'm cold, I'm scared. And we form ideas like, that's my toy, that's my mommy. As we get older, the ego drifts further and further from this state of being itself. Depth psychology posits the existence of an axis between self and ego. Now this is, at this point, this is subconscious. This is outside of our conscious awareness. But it is the life-giving sort of universal love that connects everything. It is our sense of connectedness with being, with the outer world, and with other people. It's sometimes represented like this, with this being the now conscious mind, this being the sense of being itself, and in between here is the subconscious forces, right? So these are the archetypes. These are things like the tape deck, the things that happen to you that that your experiences that leave an imprint that you don't remember, but nevertheless come up and affect your moods. They affect your thinking. But we should never lose sight of the fact that there is an axis between self and ego. You can think of this as like a tree trunk. So a healthy tree trunk, on a healthy tree, there's nutrients coming up from the root, and there are flowers and leaves that are kind of the reason for the tree itself. So it's a two-way street with things flowing unimpeded back and forth. This is what we would call a healthy ego. An unhealthy ego, and this is unfortunately most all of us. It's been damaged. This axis, through who knows what, immersion in the world, childhood trauma, a too permissive upbringing, a too strict upbringing. It's a very delicate thing, and it gets knocked cattywampus, as we say in the South. And so there is no longer a healthy flow between self and ego. So we can say that ego is a bit of consciousness that has now broken away from the main, and it has forgotten. It has forgotten this connection. Because we want to think of this as an individual. So, like, I've got a circular rainbow, you've got a circular rainbow, you've got a circular rainbow. We know that we all have egos. The news to most people is we've also all got circular rainbows representing the self. The radical idea is that my circular rainbow, your circular rainbow, are not similar. They are the same. It is the same. So it would look more like this. That's a healthy state. It's not the world we live in. The world we live in, it's cut off. So this can be a cause of a lot of pain, a lot of sorrow.
You're doing a really good job.
Thank
Everything's fine.
Thank you very much. Another thing to think about is the term of ego inflation. When we talk about someone having a big ego, or when we talk about someone who is egotistical, what we're really talking about is someone who has an inflated ego. So these are all terms from depth psychology. An inflated ego is one where this has been cut, and the conscious mind, the ego, wants to take on the same powers and the same connectedness as this, but it can't. So oftentimes our egos seem overmatched, not up to the task, cut off. In fact, isolation is a defining characteristic of ego and a tremendous cause of a lot of what we call egotistical behavior. So this is like the grasping after power, the grasping after material things, anything it can do to convince itself that it's not cut off, it's perfectly up to the task, everything's fine, right? But it's really not fine. Because the ego really wants to think that this state of being cut off is good. It's what it's supposed to do. And if you look around at the world, the society we live in tells us this is the way things should be. I'm going to pause for a second before I move on to ask if there are any like questions or points of confusion at this point. Yes, please. Okay, so the question is, how am I defining isolation? Primarily psychic in this case. It can manifest itself in a number of different ways. Could you say more about that question?
I was just thinking originally when I thought of physical isolation, but then I thought like that's not actually always a thing, but psychic isolation could just be you being unable to take in other people's ideas, or psychic isolation could just be you not being able to like express yourself or give yourself to another person.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
yeah. No, it's a really good question. Could you
Yeah.
repeat it, please? Thanks.
My question was how you were defining isolation, and it came from my thought, or the first thought of physical isolation when you're talking, but then I thought, well, no one's really that independent, so you can't be that physically isolated, but psychically isolated, you could not take in the ideas of others or continuously feel that your own expressions of self are the only valid ones, or you just can't quite contend with other people's expression of selves being other. Is that how you're defining it?
Right, yeah, absolutely. And so that reminds me of a good point, is that you can be isolated in a crowd. You can be isolated with your own family, right? So the physical part of it really is a symptom. You can also be completely fulfilled by yourself, right? Good. Anyone else? Yes, please. I'm not done yet, but please go. No, go get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you say more about a healthy ego and what that looks like?
Sure. It's actually easier to describe an unhealthy ego, but a healthy ego, I think, is really one that's capable of compassion and finds fulfillment in interactions with other people. So, like, what would be a healthy tree? It's one that makes flowers, one that is like a sense of contentment. So wisdom traditions around the world, this is the point. This is what they're looking to try to reestablish, is this connection. Not an intellectual connection, but a felt connection with the core of your humanity. Did you mean like behaviorally, or?
No, that makes sense. I think I'm also trying to imagine and think about whether a healthy ego is a state. Is it something where you're constantly moving back to equilibrium? Like, I'm just trying to make sense of what that could mean for a person.
Right. Good question. So one thing to keep in mind is that the ego really is the center of the conscious mind. There are other entities within the conscious mind, like intellect, thought, emotions, which are, I don't know if you know this or not, but emotions are a product of thought. Like, this was news to me when I came across it. I was like, that's not real. But then you start monitoring your emotions and you realize, like, God, it is. It's like these things are coming in from my thoughts. So what can happen in an unhealthy egoic state is that intellect or thought, the thinker, reacts to ego, which reacts to the thinker. The emotions get involved, and it just becomes this loop, right? This isolated loop where it just goes back and forth, bouncing back and forth like a super ball inside of a racquetball court, right? Where instead of that kind of bang, 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 bang mind, you're looking for one that has more of a flow. And I think you're right that in a healthy mental state, you are definitely sort of moving back and forth between states of mind but it's more of an easy flow and more under your control. So the problem with thought is that it's not that people don't think, it's that thought is just completely running their lives. The point that I'm trying to make with ego is that it gets very destructive when it's at the wheel, when it takes you over. And oftentimes this feels quite powerful, yeah? You can think of something like anger or jealousy. These are negative emotions, but when they come, they fill your whole being. There is nothing but that. They completely blot out the sun, right? So that's sort of what not to do. It's a fairly simple and easy thing to simply watch the thoughts, to sort of take a step back and observe them. Yeah? Okay. Anybody else? Yeah. Hey.
Just to clarify, and maybe at the risk of sounding a bit cliched, so in this diagram, is the consequence that the self is the universe, so to speak, as we are all a part of, say, like one thing?
Yeah, and don't be afraid of cliche. It never stops me. Yeah, that's exactly right. I have to kind of watch what I say up here at the risk of sort of offending people of different faiths, but that is kind of exactly what I'm saying. Wisdom traditions all around the world have embedded this in their mythology. So in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, the state of being cut off is symbolized by Adam and Eve getting thrown out of the Garden of Eden. The concept of original sin, right, is also part of that. You can also see that in a sort of different way in Buddhism. Briefly, the story of Buddha is he was born a guy named Siddhartha Gautama, and he was raised in this pleasure palace that his dad wanted to protect him from the world, so he put him in a walled-off compound. It's a sort of paradise where there was no sick people were allowed, no old people were allowed. All of it was an illusion to protect Siddhartha from the poisons and the dangers of the world. But one day, Siddhartha got on his horse. He had a great horse named Kantaka, who was this beautiful white steed. Siddhartha and Kantaka were born on the same day. And Kantaka pulled Siddhartha out of the walls of the compound for the first time. And so he was leaving paradise in the same way that Adam and Eve did. But here the metaphor sort of diverges between Christianity, Judaism, and Islam and Buddhism. And it sort of goes to the idea of the Buddhist solution of detachment. So detachment from the ego as a sort of solution. He's outside the walls of the compound, and he sees first an old man, then a sick person, then a dead body, and then an ascetic, a monk. And this is the first time he had been exposed to any of this stuff. And he knew immediately that's like, I've never seen anything like this. The life I've been living is a life of illusion, right? He set out to figure out what was the cause of suffering in the world. And of course, he eventually became the Buddha. But he decided he was going to leave that night. And he had to leave in secret. So he went back, he took his horse out, and at the wall where he was about to leave to go into the forest, he cut off his hair, threw down his weapons, and said to his horse, I have to leave you. And the horse cried. And Kantaka said to him, please don't leave me. And the Buddha said, I have to. So sometimes people will talk about Buddhism in ways that leave out love and compassion. And I think it's incorrect. Anybody else? Okay, good.
I really know the Buddha story pretty well.
Do you? You've studied it, have you?
I've studied it
Okay.
many times.
You're doing great.
You're doing great.
Okay. What happens when there's a large group of people that are all identified with a national ego, or when we're in a society that says greed is good? So we live in a world that reifies the damaged tree. We live in a world that worships individualism and celebrates materialism. So it can be sometimes confusing to come across these ideas, to look at ego not as being bad, but as being like incredibly problematic. I'm just going to read you some bad news. In the 20th century alone, humans killed 100 million members of our own species. In the natural world, the animal and plant species extinction rate is roughly 5,000 times higher than extinction rates that do not include human activity. We lose 1% of the species on Earth every year. There are now dead zones in the world's oceans. This is a place where nothing lives, from the bottom of the ocean to the surface of the sea. In the Gulf of Mexico in 2017, this dead zone was 8,000 square miles. The square miles of New York City, by comparison, is 300 square miles. The ice shelf loss in Antarctica has tripled since 2012. Every year it gets hotter. So, what in the world would cause a species to behave in an insane way? We seem to be behaving as if we had lost touch with not only ourselves and our fellow human beings, but the planet that gives us life. We seem to be concerned only with selfish individual gains. So this is where ego becomes incredibly problematic, because it's not just an individual problem, it's society-wide. So, as we've said, wisdom traditions have been grappling with this problem for thousands of years. This state of collective madness in Buddhism is called Dukkha, or suffering that's caused by attachment. So attachment would be being isolated and looking for salvation, looking for happiness outside of yourself. So in material things, not inside, but outside. Hinduism is called Maya. So Maya is an illusion that's created by the false self, by the ahamkara, by the ego. So we hear a lot of talk about Maya, illusion. What that's referring to is the egoic point of view, and the core of that illusion is being cut off, thinking that you are actually alone. As we said, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, which we call the Abrahamic religions, describe this state as original sin. So it's the fall of Adam and Eve, the expulsion from the garden. But they also provide solutions. I'm going to read you a story. So this is a little thing to give you an idea of what it might be like. It's called The Mad Captain. You're on a cruise ship. One of those giant ships that looks as if a portion of the New York skyline has broken free of the main and is floating out through the harbor. You are alone and trapped in a tiny cabin on this ship. You have always been in this cabin. You were born in this cabin. It's all you know. You have a small round window, a porthole. Through the porthole, you can see many ships just like yours out on the ocean. In your cabin is a speaker set high on the wall. Through this speaker comes a running monologue. It is the captain of your ship. The captain is in the wheelhouse, steering the ship. The captain is insane. From the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep, the captain blares his constant narration of steering the ship. It sounds like this. I am the captain, and I am in charge of the vessel. I shall steer us through the waters, rough and calm. And oh my God, the waves were getting so big, we are in trouble and no problem, because I am the captain, and this is the greatest vessel ever to float on the ocean, and we are all so fucked, because the rocks and I have this handled, and the engines are substandard and also the greatest engines. This has been going on for so long now that you have forgotten any state that is not dominated by the captain's unfolding story. The ship you are in veers wildly as the captain reacts to his own thoughts. The ship's pitching and yawing is at times so wild that it retains the ability, even after all these years, to make you violently seasick. But this is all you have ever known and experienced, so you accept it. When you gaze out your porthole, you see that all the other ships on the ocean are also wildly pitching, yawing, and swerving. This is your normal world. All the ships are doing it too. Oh my God, this ship is amazing, but they fucked me when they gave me this. Why is the wheel stuck? This is my uniform. It's such a handsome uniform. Just look at it, gaze on me, and tremble. Oh, fucking iceberg. We're gonna die horribly. No, wait, just a styrofoam cooler. And what is up with these horrible people who litter the world's oceans? They should all die. And also, I love everyone because I'm good. And soon we will run out of food, but we also have all the best food. One day, after a particularly bad day for the captain, who was in a bad mood because of the activities of puffins in the distance, you are drifting off to sleep when the ship pitches wildly, sending the contents of your cabin spilling around you. Everything you own is on the floor. He's getting worse, you think to yourself. You start the process of cleaning up again. You notice something you have never seen before. The wild swerving of the captain has dislodged a book from your shelves that you've never seen. You reach for it, and something new happens. Pay no attention to the book. You pause. Say what? Pay no attention to the book. You open the book. The ship's engines growl and your massive transport slowly picks up speed. You think for the first time that the captain knows you were there, trapped in your tiny cabin. The book is a small thing, about the size of your hand. It's dense with writing. It throbs, like the distant report of somebody else's heartbeat. Leave the book alone. We must now deal with the realities of the icebergs, the problem of the puffins, and the deplorable state of my uniform. And also, we are the greatest ship on this ocean and all other oceans. Seas and lakes, but not lakes. Lakes are for bitches, to say nothing of ponds and puddles, well threatened by the puffins. And we have now run out of food, but also have an amazing supply of all the best food. As you hold the book, you realize for the first time how often the captain uses the word also. You begin reading the book. The speaker is loud, but you do not hear it. Here's the story the book tells you. Once, there was a person trapped in a cabin on a cruise ship that was so big it looked like a piece of the skyline that had broken away from the main. In the cabin was a speaker. Through the speaker came the constant ravings of the captain of the ship. The captain was insane. You think to yourself, wow, good story. Yes, exactly. It's just a story. Entertaining, not at all real, not at all real, not at all important. Just enjoy it that way, and also put down the book. It's full of lies that will kill you. What do? You keep reading. Thank you. The book introduces the story of the person in the cabin and then concludes the first page with this. This is the story of how the passenger left the cabin and eventually steered the ship. Where did the passenger steer the ship? Home. The passenger steered the ship home. As the puffin swarm, begins the captain, and you notice a new note of pout in his voice. You settle into your bunk and read on. You wonder how the captain knows what you're doing. Is there a camera? Can he simply sense what I'm doing? You keep turning the pages in the book until you come to page 24, which just says, the captain is you. Absolute bullshit. The book lies and is also dangerous and is also historic and is also just a story, also a waste of time. The puffins are coming to eat my lunch in the engines. Also, you are not the captain. I, as demonstrato by the wheel in my hands, watch this. And the ship tips over. You think about how the captain can possibly know what it is that you're reading. The ship writes itself. If I can know, then of course I do know, and I steer, watch this. And the ship tips over again. For the first time, you think about how tiresome the captain is. All this swerving, you say to yourself, and then, hold on. I can say something to myself. Say what? Pay no attention to the book. You look out of your tiny portal, and then back at the book. On the cover is a small drawing of a portal, a window just like the one in your tiny cabin. Yeah, nice picture, and pictures are nice, and as the food runs out on the rocks and my greatness, and let's make a picture of that also, if I can think of then who was I, and that is an amazing thing I thought of. You decide to keep reading. The book goes on and on. It is difficult to concentrate. Part of your mind is hijacked by the captain's increasingly desperate monologue. He wants your attention. Hey! But you keep reading. As the day fades into night, you notice the ship has stopped its sickening lurching. You read the last lines of the book. And then there came a day where the passenger stood in front of the door to her cabin and saw that there was a handle, a knob, and a lock. She threw back the bolt of the lock. She reached for the handle. She opened the door, and she stepped out into the passageway. You look at the door to your cabin. You throw back the bolt. You reach for the handle.
I really nailed it with that story. I can write and I can paint.
So, despite the fact that a lot of guidance and things can be found in books, the answer and the solution to the problems presented by ego, these answers are not intellectual. They're experiential or somatic, which means that you can reach them sort of through the body, through the energy field of the body. Part of the problem of the things we're talking about is you're trying to understand the broken mind using the broken mind. So that can't really be done. But the good news is the wisdom traditions and religions of the world and therapy guarantees us that this wound is a wound that can be healed. And it can be done over a long period of time, or it can be done over a short period of time. One of the most effective ways that I have found to address this problem of ego is through meditation. So, raise your hand. Who has done some forms of meditation? Okay, good. Who's aware of something called chi? Beverly, what is chi?
It's the prana of the
You got to wait for the microphone. Yeah. So yeah, it's the energy that runs through the body. So this is not just like a nice Chinese word and a nice sort of esoteric concept for us to flaunt around. This is something that you can actually feel and experience on an everyday basis, and I can show you how to do that. A lot of times, these ideas like meditation and chi and spiritual solutions and words like enlightenment, all of that stuff seems to be so esoteric that it's like a superhuman accomplishment to even understand it, right? And your ego wants to keep things that way. The ego is profoundly threatened all the time by everything. The thing it's most afraid of is death, its own death. The reason it's afraid of its own death is it doesn't understand that it's actually part of everything. So the thing that's really behind a lot of the negative things that we're talking about, negative behaviors on an individual level and negative behaviors on the part of groups, nations, and I'm talking about big things like war, pollution, genocide. What's really behind this stuff is fear. Fear. So even the most powerful people, or even the most power-mad people, really what drives them is that they're afraid. And what they're afraid of is individual extinction, and this is an egoic activity. Having a real somatic, physical, experiential connection with a life-giving source inside of you really has the effect of dissolving fear, of dissolving a lust or an attachment for physical, material things. It's like these two things cannot exist in your mind at the same time. So although egoic attachments and egoic inflation, which, by the way, egoic inflation takes two forms. One they call positive, which means like, I am great, I am amazing. And you saw this in Nicole's performance as well. But it's also like, I am the worst person in the whole world. So that's also ego, right? That's what they call negative inflation. So this idea that like, I have ruined things, or things would be so much better if I wasn't around. This is an egoic activity as well, right? Because it makes you, it feels terrible, but it makes you powerful. It makes you important. You're the worst one. See what I mean? So, the solution. Before I start this, I want to introduce you to an idea that's called an extinction burst. So people that teach meditation and therapists know about this tendency, which is, it's kind of like going up to the edge of a cliff of a realization, be it spiritual or intellectual, and suddenly pulling back. Like you can only go so far. In meditation practice, what happens is like the ego will allow you to sort of practice a little bit and do it a little bit. It often will say, I don't want to meditate today, right? You've got to kind of be careful about that. You've got to kind of watch that, because the ego will come back again and again and again and again. And when you're at the verge of maybe breaking through to like a kind of big, powerful realization, which means that you're healing the lightning-struck tree. You're about to heal the divide, cross the bridge. The ego will just say, no. And you snap back. Because it sees that stuff as a profound threat to itself. It sees what we call enlightenment or fulfillment or kingdom of heaven as meaning its own death. And it's not true. This is only seeing spiritual practice from an egoic point of view. So I just wanted to put that out there before I'm going to ask you to participate in a really simple exercise. I want you to just look at your hand. Would you guys do this, please? So ask yourself, did I make that hand? Ask yourself, whose hand is this? It's totally true that the atoms in that hand were present at the Big Bang. The atoms in that hand have been around as long as the universe has been around. It's about 13 billion years. Think about all the different forms that the atoms in that one hand, the one that's right in front of you, the one you think of as your hand, think of all the different physical forms that those atoms have taken. So this is really only temporarily your hand. After you're gone, those atoms aren't going anywhere. They're going to keep going. More hands, more objects, more physical things. And what's more, this isn't even the hand that you were born with. Our bodies regenerate about every 7 years. Did you know that? So what you are really is more of a blueprint than a collection of mass, right? We eat and we breathe and we shed off things all the time. Skin cells, it's all sort of cycling in and out, right? This was not the hand you were born with. This is not the hand you had 7 years ago. It's a completely different thing. So in that way, you can think of chi or inner energy as being a bit like the blueprint of you. So in this sense, that is more truly you than the physical part. Following? Okay. Okay, now I'm gonna ask you guys to do it, but watch out for the extinction burst, okay? This makes a lot of people uncomfortable. They don't want to do it. They don't want to participate. They don't want to be part of a group. I'm not a joiner. Well, the first time somebody asked me to do something like this, I'm like, hell no. Like, I'm just always sitting in the back of the meditation hall in case I just wanted to leave. It's totally normal. But understand that the reluctance really is the egoic self being profoundly threatened. So close your eyes, please. Now, hold your hand up again, same hand that we were just talking about, and see if you can feel your hand without using images, concepts, or words. Can you feel it as a presence? For many of us, this will be the first time we've ever felt one of our body parts, independent of thought or images or labels. So it is definitely an everyday function of the mind to slather over experience with words, concepts, worries, fears, and by doing so, we miss this most basic part of our existence, which is ourself as an energetic blueprint that somehow magically attracts matter to itself in a way that is consistent and coherent. So concentrate on that feeling in your hand, and I want you to slowly make a fist. Tight fist, as tight as you can go. Tense it up. Now compare that tense feeling to the feeling of the open palm. Hold it and slowly let it go. Slowly, slowly. Okay. We're back to the open palm. Now I want you to look, using your awareness, bring that same awareness that you had in your hand into your chest. Now, for many of us, we're going to find the same tension, the tension of the fist. We'll find that in our chest, about where our heart is. So slowly let your attention dwell in your chest, and then bring it up into your head. This is a point of awareness. You're sort of exploring. So bring it up into your cranium, like the dome of your head, the dome of your skull, where your brain is. Now, if you're like most of us, you're going to find quite a bit of that fist tension up there. You can feel it. So the chest and the heart are where a lot of our chi, our inner energy, gets all bound up because of egoic activity. So this is something that you can feel. This is not a theory. This is a reality. This is a physical manifestation of emotional and mental states. Okay, open your eyes, please. Everybody knows that word, right? Okay, so it's spelled Om. It's pronounced So this is a really important seed syllable in Sanskrit. And Sanskrit is a written language, yes, but primarily a spoken language. So the syllables and the sounds in Sanskrit are there. They are situated in the parts of your mouth that make the sound. We're not used to thinking about this in English. We just don't pay any attention to it. But Om is called a seed syllable because it contains every sound that the human mouth can make. So you'd think of the ah sound as coming from here. Ah, and then the just like you moved your point of awareness from your hand to your chest to your brain, you move the sound. Think of the sound as like a ping pong ball that's moving through your mouth. So it goes, try it. Excellent, everybody. Oh, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so here's where we're bringing the two things together. This is a very useful tool because you can use it. Who was able to sense the fist tension in their chest or in their brain? You were able. Okay, good. This, of course, is a mantra. So a mantra does a lot of sort of heavy spiritual lifting, and it's really good for those of us who think too much and people who are just getting started and are maybe uncomfortable with a bunch of dogma, a bunch of religious baggage of which the world is full. A mantra will do several things. It will give your thinking mind something to play with, like a cat with a ball of yarn. It keeps the thinking mind busy. But it also has a physical component that has to do with qi and energy flow. So you can feel this when you chant properly. So it's not no. Okay, we're going to do it the proper Sanskrit way, right? This is what it was made to do, right? It was made to be used. So if you would please bear with me, close your eyes once again, and we'll chant the Om. We'll try it 7 times, okay? We'll start. One more. The next few times when you're doing it, pay attention to how the sound waves, when you make the sound, reverberate up through your skull. So for those of you who found tension up in your brain, you can use this to dissolve this tension. You can get rid of it temporarily. So try this now. Last time. Excellent. Thank you. That's all I've got. We'll go into questions. Questions, comments. And thank you so much for participating.
What about the dog?
Well, yeah, we did figure that we shouldn't have a lecture called A Dog Named Ego unless we had an actual dog. Is he here? All right, come on, Guapi, come on. There we go. This is Guapo. He's the best. He belongs to my friend Michael Haltenberger over there. And that's it. He's finished. I'm also interested in confusion points, questions, yes, but also if you could help us out by telling, was there something in particular that hit you? I'm always interested in using sort of multimedia in combination with lecture to try to get points across, but it's difficult to gauge what's working and what isn't. Tell me something. Yeah, what was it that what was working for you? I could see, yeah, I could see you, that you were connecting with things, yeah. So yeah, give her a microphone. What's your name, first of all?
Catherine.
Hey, Catherine.
Hi. I it's kind of in line with a lot of what I've been listening to lately, so it's just good to hear the same messaging in a different format. And for a lot of what I'm I'm reading and again looking into. It's just the same message in different ways, which
Right,
is
yeah.
easier for certain people to hear. So part of the reason why I keep looking over, I feel like my boyfriend is more receptive to hearing this type of messaging from someone with your background, maybe we'll say.
Right.
So from the intellectual perspective, instead of focusing on more emotional or spiritual. But it's all the same message.
Right.
It's
It
just
is.
in a
It is.
different
I mean,
format.
I agree. Look, the way. Okay, I studied comparative religion, and like the reason I really love ThinkOlio is that it gives me a venue. There are certain things in the classroom you just can't say, right? You're not supposed to say things such as this. All religions are different fingers pointing at the same thing.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, okay, good. Somebody else. Wait, you gotta wait for the mic. It's the microphones are all about the video. It doesn't pick it up, yeah.
So I've been curious about the intersection between science and religion. You know, not religious myself, but I am spiritual, and I've had this feeling for some time that everybody's talking about the same thing. So I've been simultaneously studying the science and also been open to experiences like Sadhguru, you know, an Indian mystic who also does that Om chanting. So that appears to be where your journey has taken us as well. I mean, you know, I've always wondered, ever since I did physics at school a long, long time ago, how when they only knew about atoms as being, you know, having a nucleus and the electrons, so there was a proton and neutron forming the nucleus, and then these electrons going round at great speed, and there's a massive gap between the nucleus and the electron. So I always wondered why we were solid if we were made of mostly air.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question.
It's only recently by, you know, because I mean, you know, Netflix documentaries, YouTube, everyone's talking about the science of it and how we all formed from a single cell that became two cells that could be Adam and Eve, and then everything on this planet grew from mutations. So
yeah, but not only that, but the whole show came from something that was so incredibly dense but smaller than a grain of sand. The entire universe, before all that empty space came in, when it was just matter pretty much, then bam, empty space is what made the universe possible. Right?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So is that intersection of science and religion? You seem to be in the same place that I've been trying to find myself going, just wandering blindly, turning up at random events like this, which I didn't plan.
Well, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, my daughter gave me a ticket, so that's why I'm here. It's like, yeah, sure, I'm not doing
She
anything
didn't feel like
tonight.
coming, yeah.
So I don't really know if I had a question. I just was, I don't know, I guess.
No,
it was
it's great.
waffling.
I just like to know who's in the audience as well, you know,
Yeah, you were just
and what it
asking for
was that
feedback.
attracted you here.
That was it. You were looking for feedback, and did I
That's
make
exactly
the point?
right,
So
yeah.
someone else on the same journey that's somehow finding that intersection of science and religion and a single universal explanation for everything. Yeah, I found that interesting.
Right. Well, I am suspicious of this idea that you can find a single universal answer for everything. There probably is one, but the answer is everything, which is like profoundly unhelpful. Thanks. What's your name again?
Mike.
Mike, yeah. Who else? I see several people in here from my mysticism class. There you are. How's it going? Good to see you.
I like the ego sidekick. I like the ego
Oh,
sidekick.
okay. Hey, okay. Could we get a round of applause for Nicole Pierce? Nicole's an amazing performance artist, and she is kind of uniquely qualified to do an imitation of me and my own neurotic ramblings because she is like actually my better half. So if you have any questions for her in our process, this what you just saw is kind of an experiment. We're trying to hone it, and definitely interested in feedback or questions you have about that. But go ahead.
Well, as you know, after taking your class, I've thought a lot about some of these things, so I think I was coming to some degree to enjoy returning to some of these things. But having her do the ego, and sometimes you doing the ego, or whatever it was, just was a pleasant reminder of the experience that I've had since taking your class, where I've been able to identify my ego a lot easier than I could before.
Tell us like how that came about. That's really interesting.
Well, okay, I'll try and be quick, but I had
no, that's okay.
I had a moment like where I hurt my back. It was right around where I was in your class, and I was also in this acting class, and I hurt my back in the acting class because it's a very physical acting class. And I told people in the acting class, especially this one woman who I was kind of interested in, that I would be better in a couple of days. That would be, a couple of days I'll be better. So 3 or 4 days later, I was walking to the gym, and I'd actually smoked a little pot before then, which I can say because we're not in a class.
No shame in that.
And I was walking there, and I was thinking, I'm not better. Like, why am I not better? I told this person I was going to be better in 2 days, and I'm not better. It's probably because I'm old. Like, I'm older now than I was when I hurt my back last time. And then I was like, well, no, it might not be that. It might be like maybe this is a different back injury that you suffered. It's probably different from the other one that you had. And then I was like, no, that's not it. The thing it is you don't know what it is. Like, you're making up all this dialogue because you're trying to come up with some reason to deal with these feelings that you're having. And I was just like, oh, that felt awful good to just give up the idea that I had to have some sort of thing. And I had a few more experiences kind of like that, and it's been really helpful.
Excellent, thanks. So that's the lesson of the second arrow, right? This Buddha's second arrow. The first arrow is the thing that happens to you. The second arrow is the suffering that ensues because of what you think about it or how you feel about what just happened. And the second arrow is much worse, right? Once you know that, it's not enough just to know it, but once you start to actually practice that and put it into reality in your everyday life, like this life, right? Not the one that in the meditation hall, but the one where you walk into the fucking deli and somebody's in your way,
Yeah, because a lot of times you'll recognize the crap that you were dealing with 2 weeks later when everybody that are around you is like, why were you acting like that for all that time? And you're like, oh, it's because I was feeling a certain way. So if you can catch a little bit of a break on that and get there a little earlier, I think it helps a lot of situations.
Absolutely right, yeah. And it's, so a lot of this, if you're new to spiritual practice stuff, or this, it's always a mixed bag in the Olio. So if you're new to this kind of stuff, it's I can't emphasize how much, I can't emphasize too much this idea that enlightenment is a superhuman activity, and you're going to do it wrong, you're going to fuck it up, you're not qualified, you don't know enough, you can't do it. It's just, you just make a tiny start, a tiny start. That first step is the most important one. And so you create a little mind gap, a little place where you're paying a little bit more attention to the workings of your mind, and you're gleaning an idea that oh shit, emotions are caused by thoughts. So wow, maybe I could control my thoughts. Can I control my thoughts? Maybe. Oh shit, I can control my thoughts, right? So it's just one little thing after the other, and they really do add up, and that's awesome, and really glad to hear it. It's the idea that we're taking this out of the ivory tower, out of the church, and having it be useful information in people's everyday lives is the reason all of this is happening. Thanks. Okay, we got another one. Okay, we got another one, and then you. Okay.
There you go.
My the problem that I see in it, and I'm saying this as a meditation practitioner myself, is that it's also not a universal kind of answer, because we're trying to
Okay,
find
sorry,
answer.
what do you mean by it? It is not a universal answer.
As meditation, for example.
Meditation is not a universal answer, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just to be clear. All right,
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, like the lady behind me said, it's not anyone can approach this. Not anyone are willing to hear it, because it is a story afterwards. It's another story that someone else is saying. So you could say, I'm not finding my answer in Christianity or in Judaism, so I find it in Buddhism. There's also something problematic in it, and I'm saying it as someone that I've learned a lot from this tradition, but still it's another story. It's something that
Sure. Yeah. No, you're right.
It cannot be universally explained. When you say chi, it's a name. It's a definition of something that it is not. It's still a name for something that is not graspable by someone who haven't experienced it.
Right. Well, okay. Sorry, do you got more?
So I'm asking for what is a more universal way to speak in terms that are experienceable by every person, and they're not attached to any myth or story or some type of external knowledge, because eventually the only truth we can be sure about is what we feel and what we think.
Right.
Everything that is external is subject to has the potential of being wrong, or being, because we perceive it in a way, because it goes through the filters of our perception.
Okay. Right.
How can one find an answer within itself? Like, how can we use terms that are that every person knows?
Let me give you a question back to you, and you tell me if I got it right. Okay. So the question is, the problem with meditation and concepts like qi for people from other traditions, such as myself, I was raised in the Christian church, is that we turn it into just another story, right? And so it's just another sort of thing amongst things in the world, right? And the second question is, how can we come across a universal truth that is free of externals? Yeah? Okay. So I agree with you with the first one, in that is something that happens. That is a dynamic that happens. It is a danger that happens. But it's also true that the religious institutions, certainly the ones that I was raised with, which is, I was raised at Southern Baptist Evangelical, right? And with apologies, I have to say that that strain of Christianity is reliant on hypocrisy, magic, and fear. And I view that strain as being corrupt. I don't have respect for it, but I always knew that there was something else. And so there is an advantage, there is a way of finding glimpses of universal truth in another tradition. You do have to kind of keep in mind that, like, okay, Buddhism and Hinduism originated in Asian cultures. We're not in an Asian culture. So there's a good argument to say that I could never fully understand Buddhism, because I don't live in Asia. I don't live in an Asian culture. My pushback on that is that, like, I understand enough to transform my life. I don't have to fully understand it, right? I get it enough that it has made a big difference in my life, and I'm able, believe it or not, to communicate just the basics to other people that have never heard of it. So I think that's a tremendous advantage. It doesn't disprove what you say. I think both things are true, right? And the answer to the second one is, like, how can we, or the answer. My answer to the second one is I can't think of any way that you can come across this stuff free of externals. I don't know. Now, one guy that could answer that question would be like St. Paul, right? He's just walking down the road and he gets hit with a vision. Okay? That has not happened to me. According to legends, it does happen. By what means that happens, it certainly seems to happen to people that didn't do anything to earn it, or go after it, or deserve it. Some do, some don't. But it seems totally random, and it's completely outside my sphere of experience. And until I see something like that, I'm going to say what we're looking at as a metaphor. How's that? Good enough. Good enough. All right. Okay, so yeah, sorry. This guy's getting a workout. Thanks, Nicholas.
Hi. I just want to say something that I enjoyed about this. I mean, I'm familiar with Om and meditation practices. I was actually doing that like all day today. But I really enjoyed how you engaged your like physical body with it by starting with your hand and closing your eyes and feeling the energy of your hand and then closing it. Because for me, I feel like in terms of being aware of my chi and my chakras, I'm always quick to assume that it's like my emotions, and I'm like, oh, well, it's starting with my heart, you know, everything is like what's getting to my heart. But then as we went through that exercise, I realized, no, like there was no fist tension in my heart, but there was the fist tension in my mind. It's because I'm constantly intellectualizing spirit or like meditative practices.
Yeah,
so
isn't it? It's a
really
little
cool.
scary
Yeah.
to like, oh shit, because check back in with yourself,
Yeah.
because you'll find it just like comes right back.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like a I don't know what you even call it. It's like it's got a habit. Like that's where it goes, right? And it's really common.
Mm-hmm.
But did you find the sound like dissolves it, right?
Yeah.
Wow,
That was very,
yeah.
Very profound. That was
Good.
good practice.
Excellent, good.
Use that.
Thanks. All right, last one. There's a guy in the back here.
Hey,
Hey, what's your name? I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to ask.
Malcolm.
Malcolm. Hi,
Yeah.
Malcolm.
I appreciate just to go off what you were saying about the hand exercise. I appreciate that part, especially because, or the fact that you also address the dogma and the ideas that surround these ideas that can
Very briefly and broadly,
yes,
but yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, but you also highlighted some fundamental things that you can do that are not so heavily attached to those things, like Om. Like that's something you can just do. Like we all just did it, and that spoke to me because I started doing meditation through martial arts, so I didn't really have a lot of the concept of behind it of the ideology. So it was just something that I did, and that helped me a lot in terms of just being like a functional thing that you can do in your everyday life. I grew up, I had a really stressful childhood, and a part of me was, my whole body, not a part of me, was manifesting that stress and those things. And one thing that really helped me was like being able to focus on my breathing and things like that. This one time when I went to the dentist.
The dentist thing. Yeah, go on. I know this one. Go on. Yeah.
I realized that I had such an absurd amount of stress pent up in my body that I gave myself a kind of lockjaw, where when my dentist told me to open my mouth fully, I felt the muscles in the back of my neck restricting. And so just having like basic things like focusing on your breathing, like Om, like just being able to do that kind of fist exercise is a good gateway to get people into it if they have one thing that's easy that can kind of transition them into, learning more about it despite wherever it comes from, culturally.
Excellent. Thank you so much, man. That's kind of like that's sort of the idea, is try to find that sweet spot between a very simple exercise that is nonetheless sort of technically authentic and part of a long tradition that I don't like make up, but is accessible enough that goes with what we're talking about, but you can remember how to do it because you felt it, right? Not that you're walking away with a set of instructions. Okay, first, what do? I like open my hand. I can't remember, but because you felt it, right? But the dentist thing, I've got a different dentist thing I thought we were going to talk about. So some of this stuff can like really help you with physical pain, because you can detach from uncomfortable situations or physical situations by observing them, right? In the same way you observed the clenched fist. You can look at even physical pain or emotionally uncomfortable situations and not be as tightly bound to them, right? And again, it's just like creating like a little bit of distance between you and that experience that's right in your face can make a really big difference. It's that gap, it's that moment that makes a difference. Okay, I think, okay, yeah, go ahead. One more, please. Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Here you go.
Okay, what's your name?
Anne.
Anne. Hi, Anne.
Hi.
We've met, right?
I'm sorry?
Have we met?
A couple of times.
Thought so.
I've come to
Okay.
I've come to hear you speak.
Okay, yeah.
I wanted to say that I really love the picture of the fetus, and I really love
thanks.
how it brings everyone together, and it's in the way you stated, but even just looking at it, I think there's a feeling that you just understand it. It's maybe only women, I don't know. But, so I wanted to say I appreciated that. And I have a question that I would probably only ever ask you. I'm curious, I have this little curiosity that all life systems are the same, you know, birth,
Oh,
life,
wait, what do you
death,
mean? They're all life systems are the same. That's quite a statement.
beginning, birth, life, death.
Okay, right.
Intake, output,
Right, sure, yeah.
like that. And this is just really weird. That you
This is like, you're in good company, okay? So
that's what I think.
Yeah.
That maybe we could be all particles of a larger body. Maybe there's like this
Oh, yeah, I've thought
really
that too.
humongous giant, and all the planets are like different feeding systems. And
No, that's totally true.
you never know.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you're an electron,
I could
do you
never
know
tell
you're
that
in a
to-
liver? No, you do not.
I'm so happy.
Especially my liver.
I've never told that to anybody.
No, that's good. That's good. Has anybody else had that thought? I certainly have. Yeah. See, look,
Oh,
these are just the ones that are admitting it. Okay, I guess we gotta go. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks.